Hello you guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be filming my birth story with baby number 2, baby Theodore. He is a month old in a couple days, so I feel like I need to do it now before the details get a little bit too fuzzy. I did share more like on my TikTok and Instagram. If you guys don't follow me on there, I'm definitely able to post a little bit more often right now on those platforms just because they're a little bit quicker. But yeah, he is here. He's perfect. He's getting so big so fast and all chunked up. He just fell asleep, so I'm gonna put him Welcome back, you guys. It feels awesome to finally be filming a video. Nice. So I actually asked you guys on my community tab here on YouTube to ask me some questions, but first I'll just get right into my birth story. So this is my second child. I had another unmedicated water birth at a birth center. I had the same experience with, well, same type of birth with my first son, but totally different experience. It was May 20th, the day before my due date, and I had been having contractions the day I turned 39 weeks, every single day up until this point. I was 39 weeks and 6 days, and I'd been having pretty consistent contractions for over a week at this point. They were intense. Like, they would start out really like mild in the day, and then towards the evening they would be pretty close together. Like, sometimes they were as close together as 4 minutes. But then as soon as I would go to bed, they would stop, and they were intense. Like, they were painful, but I could still talk through them. And so I just, in my head, I was like, oh, it's just prodromal labor. I had kind of a same experience with my last birth, just not for so many days in a row. And so when I woke up on the 20th to more contractions, I didn't really think much of it. I was like, just another day of false labor. The great and beautiful part about all of this false labor or prodromal labor, I don't think it was false labor. I think it actually really did help progress my body. But the great part about all of it is I was still able to get sleep at night. When I had it with my last son, it would only be throughout the night. So I would go all night without sleep, and then they would stop when I would wake up for the day. So I was just exhausted. But this time, I would sleep all night long. So I woke up on the 20th at 3 a.m. I remember looking at my phone to a contraction that I was like, holy guacamole. Like, I was just laying in bed, woke up, contraction, and I lifted my leg. Like, I'm laying on my side and I lifted my leg in the air. It was just like what my mind was like, this will help. And it was the only thing that helped, really. And as soon as I had that first contraction, I was like, ooh, that felt different. I don't know how to explain it other than I literally could feel myself dilating. Like, I could tell and feel that I was dilating. And so I had them every 10 minutes from 3 a.m. to about 6:30 a.m. So I shot a text to my mom and my sister because they were supposed to come and like be my childcare, but also come and take pictures of my birth. I was like, hey, you guys might want to head this way. Like, I'm not sure, but this is happening. And it was a Saturday, and Austin was working, which was kind of rare, but he was working. Like, he woke up at 6, and I told him, I was like, I think I might be in labor, but he's like so used to me saying that at this point, and I was so calm that he was like, okay, well, just call me, like, if you need me to come back home. I went to work, and I got up at 6 a.m. Belle was still sleeping, and I started cleaning the house, and my contractions were very intense and 4 minutes apart. So I was like, oh, we are going, like, it is time. My mom and my sister get here around 7:30, and my contractions slow way down. They're like 10 minutes apart, 6 minutes apart, 8 minutes apart, 20 minutes apart, like, just kind of random. And so I stopped timing them because I'm like, whatever. At this point, they're just annoying me that they're not staying consistent. But they were slowly increasing in intensity. Like, they were pretty intense, but my whole goal with this birth was to stay mentally there. Like, I wanted to be in it. I did so much mental prep work the first time around, but then I had never experienced birth before, so I didn't really know what to prepare for. And so when I was in actual labor my first time around, all my mental prep work and like coping mechanisms went out the door, and I totally gave in to the pain. This time I was so determined to do it differently and stay mentally there. And so I feel like, yes, those contractions were super intense, but because I was so dead set on being like mentally there and staying calm and in control, that it was a totally different experience. So anyways, I was like, well, I don't know if it's happening today, so why don't we like try to do something fun and take my mind off of it. We went on, and I wanted to progress things. I wanted to see like, okay, let's keep things moving. So I wanted to stay on my feet. We took a long walk in my neighborhood. My housing addition was doing garage sales that weekend. So we walked around to some garage sales, and I was just like breathing through them the whole time. I would be like talking to my sister, and then she'd be like, are you having one? Like they would kind of get freaked out every time I had one, because I would just like get quiet. But I was like, I just got this. Like I was just in the zone, and still thinking like this is false labor, not going anywhere. So we get back from garage sales, and I'm like, okay, well obviously nothing else is really picking up, so let's just go to the farmer's market. I love the farmer's market. I don't want to sit around and be bored and like wishing I was in labor. So we all loaded up and went to the farmer's market, and I remember when we got there that I was like instant regret. Like I was just irritated. It was hot. I was having contractions. There was too many people there. And I was just like, I'm just tired. Like, I just want to lay down and take a nap. This is dumb. Like, I'm not in labor. I'm bummed, blah, blah, blah. But I'm having contractions. And at the farmer's market, I started timing them without telling my mom and my sister. And they were like 4 to 6 minutes apart there. We get home. I put my son down for his nap. And I was like, I'm going to try to take a nap too. Because I also was getting frustrated because my mom and sister, like, they don't care at all. They would have come in every single day for me, but they drove like 25 minutes to my house, and I like just felt bad for inconveniencing them, which I know they did not feel inconvenienced, but in my head I'm like, I'm inconveniencing them. Like, I'm obviously not having a baby today, blah, blah, blah. So I went up to put my son down for his nap, and I tried to sleep as well. I probably napped for an hour, but I woke up every 10-ish minutes in that nap and had to, again, like raise my leg up and like breathe through contractions. They were so intense when I was laying down. Anytime that I would rest, like anytime I would lay down, I would have contractions, and they were like, oh, like I remember when I was laying in Bellamy's bed, I kept thinking, I need to get out of here because I'm going to wake him up. But then when my contraction would end, I would be so tired that I would fall back asleep before I could leave his room. So I was so worried I was going to wake him up from his nap because I was laying in bed with him. So finally I got up and I was like, let's see if I can keep these going. I go downstairs again. They completely stop. And by now it's like 2:30, and I wanted to just let my mom and sister enjoy their day. So they were like, well, just call and see if you should go in. So I called the birth center. And how a birth center, I don't know how hospitals work because I've never given birth at one, but how the birth center works is they have like typical office hours where there will be someone there if you wanted to go get checked at the birth center. But it was a weekend, so nobody was there, but they had people on call. So I was like, I don't want to inconvenience these people either. Like, they're enjoying their weekend. And like, I don't want to call them and have them drive all the way to the birth center and check me and me not even be in labor, which I know that's literally their job. This is just how I work. This is how I think. I'm always worried about inconveniencing people. I call, and it was actually a new midwife that I had met during my prenatal appointments. She was on call, and then she told me who else was on call. And when she told me who else was on call, it was the girl who delivered my first son. She was also on call. So I was like, this is ironic. And I had my first son the day after his due date, and this one I was going to go in the day before. I thought it was funny. Anyways, I call her. I'm like, this is what's happening. I don't think I'm actually in labor. Now they're like 10, 15 minutes apart, but I don't know. Like, I just feel like this is something. And she was like, yeah, girl, like, just wait a couple hours and you can come in. Well, let's plan to meet at 6 p.m. She was like, we're really close to the birth center anyway, so let's just check you anyways and see if you're at least like progressing. So 2 hours go by. I come up to my room because I'm like, if this is real labor, I want it to progress, because it's just, with my first birth, it was boom, boom, boom. Like, it never stopped. As soon as it started, there was no break. There was no break at all. So I, in my head, kept thinking, this can't be real labor, because I'm kind of like getting breaks. And I still felt so calm and in control, and that was like kind of weird for me. So I came up to my room. Everyone else was downstairs, and I labored on the ball and like bounced. I did some lunges, I stretched, I laid on the bed for a second. My dog actually vomited like 6 times in my room while I was doing this, and I was so irritated. I was like, could you have picked a worse time to vomit? To clean that up. So I'm like cleaning up dog puke while I'm working through contractions, you know. And I remember that when I took the shower, the second I stepped in the shower, oh, things picked up like very quickly too. They weren't happening more quickly, but when I would get one, it was longer and it was so intense. And so yeah, Austin finally got home from work and I was like, hey, they want me to come in. And he was like, oh, okay. I grabbed my bag, we say bye to Bellamy. We get in the car and he goes, do you just want to call him and tell him we're not coming? He's like, I don't feel like you're in labor. You seem normal. And I was like, I know, but I just want to at least get checked so that my mom and sister can know like how far along I am or whether or not to go home, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. I just was confused. So we get there. It's very calm. There's not a single person at the birth center besides the midwife on call. And we go in and she brings me into like the birth suite that I wanted to give birth in. Like, and the sun was hitting it because the sun was starting to set. It was evening time. It was just like beautiful and super quiet, and I lay on the bed and I'm like fully disappointed at this point because my contractions from the point that Austin got home from work to the birth center was probably a half hour, not a single contraction. And so I'm like, obviously that's not good news. And she has me lay down and checks me, and I'm telling her, I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I don't think I'm like really in labor, blah, blah, blah. I was explaining my first birth experience and she goes, oh, well, great news. You are literally almost 7 centimeters. Like, she was like, you're more than 6.5 centimeters. And I was like, what? Because like, that's just almost transition. That's crazy. Because when you get to 7 to 8 centimeters is transition and then you push. So I was like, oh, so like we have been doing something. And so she was like, yeah, get comfy. Like, you'll probably have a baby tonight. And she just was so calm and chill. And she just like walked back out after she like checked baby and stuff. Like, they are very laid back about it. That's what I love about a birth center. There's not a bunch of beeping monitors and stuff. But anyways, she walks back out to the lobby and I sat on the birth ball and I talked with Austin, and he was just like making me laugh, and we were just having normal conversation. And I would work through contractions as he's talking to me. I was able to move during my contractions. That's totally different than my first birth experience. With my first, any time I had a contraction, I had back labor. I didn't have one single normal contraction. They were all in my back. And so when I would have one, I just would seize up and like collapse to the floor. Like, I could not move. And if you have experienced back labor, then you know. But this time I didn't have back labor, and so I was able to like do the lunges and the squatting and the swaying, and I did lots of like, I walked around a lot, I sat on the toilet a lot, I was on the ball a ton as well. And then also putting my foot up on a bench and like leaning forward, so only one foot was up. I think that helped get Theo down through my pelvis. So I worked through a couple contractions, but I was starting to get really bummed because I was not really having very many. And so she suggested, she was like, well, here's a couple of things we could do. And she was just so great about not being pushy and like really explaining my options and like the results of each option. Like, she even explained, like, if we break your waters, things are going to get very intense very quickly and you need to be ready for that, or blah, blah, blah. So she suggested pumping to get some oxytocin flowing and contractions going. So she had me pump for 15 minutes. I did that. And then she wanted me to get in the shower for 15 minutes. I did that. Intensity kind of still the same. I think I would say it was very intense, but because I'm comparing it to my first experience, it does not seem intense, because my first experience was back labor and it just was absolutely agonizing. And I was not in control mentally. So I get out of the shower and she comes in to check me again. And at this point, I had probably been there for an hour. And I was 9 centimeters. I was like, what? I'm 9 centimeters, my water still hadn't broken, and I'm progressing very quickly. And so I felt really comfortable with the idea of having them break my waters. I'm very much anti-intervention unless absolutely needed, or very educated on it. And she had told me several times, like, his head was in perfect position. She could feel his head down there. He was like moving around, moving his head. And she said I felt perfectly soft. I was almost completely dilated, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, yeah, I would like you to break my water. And she did. And that was not, it was not painful. It was definitely like bizarre, because they waited till I was in a contraction to break it. And then like feeling it all gush out was just very bizarre. because my water broke naturally with my first labor. So after she broke that, I know how it goes. I know exactly how it goes. When your water breaks, things are way more uncomfy. And as soon as she broke my water, I got a contraction literally 30 seconds later. And those ones were like, yeah, this baby's coming. And at that point, my mom had finally gotten there, and I had sent her back out to the lobby because I was like, it'll probably be a while. They just broke my water, so I need to progress. And after my second contraction, after they broke my water, I told them they needed to bring my mom back in because I was about to have this baby and I wanted pictures and I wanted her to be in there. And so I'm laying on my side on the bed with a peanut ball in between my legs. And what's funny is when they made me do that position, or they didn't make me, but when they suggested that position with my first labor, I was absolutely pissed. Like, it was horrible with my first labor. So painful, terrible, terrible, terrible. If they asked me to lay down, I was like, absolutely not. This time, it was painful, very painful. I was in transition, but it was helpful and it felt good in between. And so when I was doing that, Austin was pressing on my hips, like pushing, like pressing and pushing upwards, just like relieve the tension in the muscles there. And then I was squeezing as hard as I could on some combs that I had brought, because that was one of the coping mechanisms that I wanted to use, and that was when I wanted to use it, was during transition. So I'm squeezing the combs, I'm breathing like as hard as I possibly can, and then I think I probably had 3 or 4 contractions on the bed, and they were less than a minute apart. And there was one where I was like, oh my, I almost pushed my baby out on that one, and I literally said, I do not want to push on dry land, I need to get in the tub. So the midwife, the tech, and the nurse come in, and they Austin helps me get to the tub, and as soon as I got in, the contractions were rolling in, and like my body was just pushing. Like the very second that my bottom half of my body was in that water, my body was pushing. And pushing for me, I wouldn't say it's like the most painful part. It's just so intense. Like, and that's when I really had to fight for me to stay mentally there, because I felt so mentally present my whole labor and just like in control and like in tune with the Lord and just like here, like I was coherent, and that was like so important to me this time around. But pushing, I was starting to lose it a little bit because it was just so intense. Like he was just like coming out, and they even had to tell me like, slow down, like catch your breath, slow down, and like you're losing control a little bit. Austin's in my ear just being so kind and encouraging and sweet, and he's like right there, like he's holding onto my shoulders and his head is right here, and he's just saying everything that I needed to hear. I can kind of hear my mom encouraging me in the back, and then my midwife Nikki, who delivered Belle, she's outside of the tub encouraging me. And then behind me is, because I'm on my hands and knees, that is how I have pushed out both babies. They even tried to get me to flip. They were like, why don't you like try a different position, because they wanted to see if it would give me any relief. I tried to turn over, and right away I was like, no, 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 no. I like yelled at them. So there's a tech behind me, and then my midwife Tiffany, she's the one who delivered him this time and was like with me my whole labor. And I think I pushed for 20 minutes again this time, maybe less, and he was out. And when he came out, his cord was a little bit wrapped around his neck, which is not always something to panic about. Most of the time it's not anything to panic about, because they were monitoring his heart rate during every contraction, so the cord was not tightening around his neck during each contraction. And like they're breathing through the placenta and the cord when they come out, so it's not like, oh, he can't breathe. If they were to cut that, then yes, that would cause a problem. So they're like unwrapping him, and I'm holding him, and I had to like kind of stand up a little bit to give him more cord because it was a little bit short. So they unwrap him, they give him to me, I'm crying, Austin's crying, and then I just kept saying a bunch of random stuff. I always say random stuff after I give birth. Like I was like, he's so small, is he too small? Because I was used to my giant toddler. And just like, holy cow, I'm so glad that's over. I'm done, I did it. Like, yeah. So then this was the only part of my birth that was like a little bit freaky. I stood, after I birthed the placenta, I stood up out of the tub and basically like passed out. Like I was still standing and stuff, and they got me in a chair, but when I woke up, someone was holding my chin. Like I'm sitting up and someone's holding my chin like this, and I can see everybody, but I'm like asleep, and I open my eyes and I'm still very sleepy, and everyone's going, don't go to sleep, like stay awake, Celeste, can you hear us, blah blah blah. And Austin, I see him and he's holding Theo and he's like a little bit panicked, and they're all just like trying to get me to be coherent, and I keep saying, I can hear you, but barely. Like my ears were ringing and they sounded muffled. And I just kept saying that over and over. And then next thing I know, I get a jab in the leg, which they had already asked me. I consented to everything, but they gave me a shot of Pitocin in my leg because they said that this is something they've seen, like a huge increase in postpartum hemorrhaging in the last couple of years, like United States wide, not specifically my birth center, but just after COVID, that's been like an issue for people. And so yeah, they gave me Pitocin, and they were just like worried about hemorrhaging, but it actually, I was not hemorrhaging. It was just because my bath water was so warm. I had just pushed so hard, and I like was dehydrated and stuff, and I just stood up too fast. It basically is what happens, because it was this all happened within like 20 seconds, and I was completely back to normal. And then I get in the bed and we're just doing postpartum recovery stuff, skin to skin. Austin's getting skin to skin. They checked me for tearing and I had no tearing again, which praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. Not that that's the worst of all things that could happen in birth, obviously, but I was really worried about tearing and then recovery of tearing, because I still have a toddler to take care of, and we live in a multi-level house now. And so I wasn't sure how to navigate going up and down the stairs with a tear, and how to recover, like give myself ample recovery time, because I knew I would have to get right back to taking care of my toddler. So yeah, I didn't tear. And basically I got to the birth center at 6:30, and I had him at 9:30, so 9:30 p.m. So it was like a 3-hour active labor, obviously like at the birth center, but I had been laboring all day, and we were home and in our own bed by 2 a.m. And it was just so blissful, like seriously, just the coziest, sweetest birth ever. I couldn't have even asked for better timing. I loved not going into labor in the middle of the night. It was great being in labor during the day and like just coming home. Like it was just so great. So I woke up the day of my due date in my own bed with my baby, and it was just awesome. So that's my birth story, and then I don't want this video to be too long, so I'll go through some of these questions. What are your birth and postpartum essentials to have on hand? I didn't, honestly, like, I gotta be honest, I really didn't use like any of my postpartum care because I didn't tear. Last time, I didn't tear either, but I did have like lots of burning and swelling down there because I just was in labor for so long, and it just was intense. This time I didn't even really have swelling or any type of burning when I peed or anything like that. So I think I used the Peri bottle once, and then the rest of the time the only thing I really used was my adult diapers and a couple ice pads, just because they felt nice. But I think that obviously is different for everyone, but I would say get the Frida kit just to be safe, because it has everything in there. But then the stuff that I actually used, I've been loving the LV Curve instead of the Haka. So amazing. It fits in your bra, so you can actually get stuff. The Haka you can't wear with a bra, and I collected so much milk I haven't had to pump at all because I've just been using that. And a good night light for breastfeeding, the Breast Friend breastfeeding pillow, and lots of coffee and food gift cards is what I would say. Have you found recovery from birth the second time around, and how are you adjusting to being a mom of two? Recovery this time was easier in the first couple of days, but harder after, because with my first one, the first few days were really intense, but I was able to rest 100% of the time. So I feel like I recovered pretty much after the first week. I was like, my bleeding had completely gone away, and just like I was already feeling so much better. This time I did rest for the whole first week, but obviously like I have another child to take care of, and like it's just different when you already have a family to take care of. So I didn't get to rest as long or as often, so I do feel like my bleeding dragged out a little bit longer. I definitely was like a little bit weaker this time around postpartum. I don't know if that had anything to do with like not working out in my pregnancy towards the end. But it was easier in a sense that like my body, I didn't have any tearing or muscle soreness, or I had like slept, and he honestly is a way better sleeper than my first son. And then how are you adjusting to being a mommy of two? I'm still adjusting. I will be adjusting for a long time. I was really scared the first week because Austin was home with Belle and he was so whiny because he was out of routine and he's not used to dad taking care of him 24/7. I basically like hid in our room because I knew if he could see me, he would want me, and I just needed to recover and spend one-on-one time with him. So I was struggling with mom guilt and just like, oh, and it seemed so daunting. But then even after like, I would say a week and a half, I was like, oh, like I can dip my toe back in. I very slowly got back into the swing of things, and like I'm doing it each day, but I definitely have moments where I'm like, this is a lot and I need to find ways to manage my mental health better, and like just making time for the Lord, because that is the only thing that's going to get me through. Like my postpartum hormones are still, you know, doing this. So I definitely have moments where I get very overwhelmed, very overstimulated. And it's not even necessarily by the kids, it's just like everything outside of that. Like, how do I keep up with this house? And we have so much going on behind the scenes outside of everything else that life can be pretty overwhelming. So I would say I'm adjusting really well. Like, we've gotten out of the house every day. Like, I feel comfortable taking them places by myself. That I'm really, really glad about. And like, I don't know, I feel like we're doing okay day to day, but definitely I can tell myself mentally I need to have better coping mechanisms. Like, I'd really like to start getting up before both of them, sacrificing a little bit of sleep and spending time with the Lord, getting ready for the day, and just like, I need some alone time, even if it's 10 minutes. So you have wanted to go the same route with your birth of Bellamy as this baby now that you've had two different experiences. I actually did go the same route. Same birth center, same prenatal care, same provider. The only difference was I didn't have back labor and my labor was much shorter. So yeah, I hope to be able to have birth center births with all of my babies. I would even potentially love to go for a home birth, but the only reason I don't love that is like, I don't know, something nice about the birth happening somewhere else and then like coming home to my house immediately after and not having like the birth stuff around. I don't know. Having a birth center birth in August, if you could explain what the birth and aftercare is like, that would be helpful. So I don't know how all birth centers work, if they're all the same or not, but my birth center, I receive all my prenatal care through that provider. I go to like a regular OB. Well, the guy who runs the birth center is a regular OB, so I go to that office for my appointments with all the midwives and do like pretty much the same prenatal care that everybody else receives at a hospital. And the only difference is I feel like you can say yes or no to a lot more. Like you have more informed consent. And then for the birth center, they have some requirements. So like we didn't have to them this time because I had my babies close enough together, but you have to take these mandatory birth classes. They're amazing, like absolutely worth it. You take those to make sure you're completely educated on what you're doing, and they educate you on a birth center birth versus a hospital birth, risk factors that could risk you out of giving birth at the birth center, and just you're very well versed. And yeah, and as long as you don't have any of those risk factors, you're set to deliver at the birth center, as long as you don't go into labor before 37 weeks. And the afterbirth care was great. Like a nurse checked me probably every 10 minutes and then every 30 minutes and then every hour, just like blood pressure, bleeding, my uterus, everything, to make sure I'm good to go home, because they send you home after 6 hours. And then I got a call at 2 weeks postpartum. You can go in for an appointment too if you want to, but I also went in for it was like a 48-hour checkup. Me and baby all went in. I got checked, baby got checked, and I have a 6-week appointment as well. And yeah, it's just you eat a meal in bed after birth, and they it's just super chill. They're very hands off, like they're very there to help you, but they also just want you to have time with your baby, so they're just kind of like at a distance, and it was super relaxing. I absolutely loved it. I'm giving birth to my second child in September. I'm very scared of delegating time between two babies. Do you have mental struggles with this? How is it for you on a daily basis, making sure you're spending time with them and not having mom guilt? This is hard. It is very hard. I struggle with feeling guilty that I'm not giving my newborn 100% of my attention, and then I struggle with Bellamy because I can tell he is also struggling. He misses getting my 100% attention, but I also just know, I'm like, I grew up in a house with many siblings, and I know I received plenty of love, and there's plenty of love to go around, and it's just like to think that a child can only succeed and grow up feeling loved and secure by receiving 100% of attention 100% of the time is silly. Like, there are going to be moments where they're both crying and they both need something, and you have to like kind of gauge which need is more urgent, and that is hard. But what I more struggle with is like the patience right now, and like just those moments where it's like you cannot figure out why your toddler is crying, and you cannot figure out why your newborn is crying, and your toddler doesn't want you to help the newborn, and your newborn needs help right now. And it's just like those moments I definitely think are harder. But the mom guilt is more, it's more bearable than I thought it would be, but it's still hard. I just have to constantly remind myself, I'm like, as long as, even if I only have 30% to give today, as long as I give 100% of my 30%, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I know Bellamy knows that I love him. I know that Theo knows that I love him. And I'm just doing the best that I can. They're doing the best that they can. And just like lower your expectations on yourself for sure. What techniques and distractions did you do for the pain this time? So much mental prep work, so much like listening to positive birth stories, rewatching every video on Built to Birth's YouTube channel. I had a very curated worship playlist, and I did lots of prayer and meditation, and just like training my brain basically in a moment to just go into prayer and go into affirmations. I kept repeating to myself like, one more controlled contraction, or I'm one more contraction closer to meeting my baby. And just like the deep breathing is seriously what changed it for me this time. I kept very in control and very focused on my breathing, which I tried to do the first time, but I just gave into the fear and the pain. And this time I just was very loud. I would breathe in really loud and breathe out very loud and long and low noises. And I just was like doing whatever felt good. And the combs, I definitely think that helped a lot. Squeezing combs, using the birth ball, and just really like each time you have a contraction, don't resist it. I also said the phrase to myself many times, floppy face, floppy fanny, because if your face is relaxed, your body is relaxed. So when I would feel the urge to tense up or wince at a contraction, I would just like literally like, you know, like just relax and breathe, and that helped a lot. And I don't know how to do it on camera without it being weird, but during the transition and pushing phase, I was doing like horse breathing a lot, like where you go, that helped so much. I would breathe in and then I would go, because then you can't be tense. You can't tense up here. If you are tensing up anywhere, you're going to be in pain. So just like as relaxed as you can be, do that. What would you say to a mom of a very bad sleeper, but she wants a second baby, but is scared of handling two? Literally me. When I got pregnant with Theo, Belle was still in the worst sleep. Like, he just has been a terrible, terrible sleeper from the day he was born. And when I was in my first trimester, he went through the 18-month sleep regression, and that was agonizing. We were waking up every 15 minutes, like, whew. And so I kept thinking, how am I going to do this? But I also just kept reminding myself, I was like, I just will. Like, I never thought I'd be able to even deal with a bad sleeper, and here I am. Like, you just do. And I also just knew that God would get me through. God would do it. God gave me another baby. He's going to get me through. I'm going to figure it out. And here we are, and his sleep has improved so much. Literally the day I went into labor, he slept through the night for the first time, and like has been consistently just doing so much better. And that has actually been like the least of my concerns, to be honest, with a newborn. Like, he's been such a better sleeper, doesn't have a tongue tie, praise God. That made a huge difference in my postpartum experience and breastfeeding and his temperament. Balmy had a severe tongue tie that we did get released, but still, like, just, it's been totally different. But you can absolutely do it, and don't let fear like that control whether or not you bring another life into this world, because you're already killing it, and you're like, we're never gonna really get great sleep again anyway, so it's silly to let that hold us back. Do you plan on having more kids? Yes, I do. I don't really need to elaborate anymore on that. I want to have kids, but more kids, but not right now, not for a little bit, and also just whenever God decides to bless us with another one. Let's do one more question, because I feel like this is going to be super long. What has God taught you through giving birth twice now, and do you feel like you learned something different the second time compared to the first? Absolutely. This time around, I was telling Austin, I felt a very strong urge my first time to do an unmedicated natural water birth, for many reasons, but mostly because I don't like hospitals. I just don't feel comfortable in them, and I just really wanted to see what it was like. But this time I felt like a spiritual pull to do an unmedicated. This time I felt like more of a spiritual pull to do unmedicated natural birth, and God taught me so much going into that about like why I really felt that way, and why it felt like the right decision. Not that I don't think that it's wrong to go medicated, and I think there's absolutely times where it's like life or death, and it makes such a difference, but so just take that with a grain of salt. But this time around, so much kept coming up about suffering, and suffering being a part of the Christian faith and the Christian walk. And I was invited to a women's prayer night, and I went, and it came up there as well, just like the beauty of a woman suffering and like what that does for your faith. And I just like kind of realized like Christ suffered to birth new children, because when you become saved, you become a new creation, you are born again. So he suffered an agonizing, brutal death, hung on a cross, so that I could be born again. Like, to bring my new life into existence, he suffered as much suffering as you could possibly imagine. And he did that like joyfully and willingly, and I think because of that suffering, you have like such a deeper appreciation for your new life, and such a deeper love for your new life. And I was like, that is a direct parallel to giving birth. I wanted to suffer to bring my children into this world, not in a way like I just want to be in agonizing pain. Like, I obviously cope, and like you try to make the best of it, but I welcome that pain, and I welcome that struggle. Like, it's hard. It's so hard to give birth. It's so hard, even if you are medicated. Like, I think you can absolutely have this experience medicated, but I just was thinking how beautiful it is that I'm willing to suffer to bring my children into this world. I want to suffer so that when I hold them in my arms, it is like I did that for you. I love you. I brought you into this world, and like I would suffer a million times for these little guys. Being willing to suffer for my children, like I wanted to do that. I was excited because it felt like I was tasting a little bit of the suffering that Christ did on the cross, and like to give new life, and that like it just has so much meaning that there is suffering behind it. It makes everything so much more worth it, and just like the love that he has for his children. There's no coincidence. Like, it's not a coincidence that like childbirth is painful and like agonizing, and like comes through an effort of suffering. Like, I would labor, literally the word labor, I would labor. There's no amount of labor that I wouldn't do for my children, and that's how Christ feels about us, but 10 times more. And I really felt like that was a cool lesson that like that God wanted to teach me this time around. And that's also like a huge motivator and factor of why I was able to keep my composure so much this time. And just also, there's nothing that will bring you to your knees, and like the veil of between heaven and earth and flesh and spirit are so thin when you are in childbirth that you have nowhere else to turn to but God. Like, I'm sure there are people who do not even believe in the Lord that are crying out to him and begging for mercy when they're in childbirth. Like, even those people are surrendering to him. So to me, it was like, Lord, use this as like, bring me to my low point to where I am like worshiping and honoring you out of sheer like stripped thin, like just all out button, like bare naked, bare bones, like vulnerability in front of you. And that's how it feels. And like the prayers you pray in the middle of labor and the worship songs you sing, nothing feels more authentic and real than like when you are suffering and you are worshiping the Lord simultaneously. And actually that has carried over into my postpartum season of life, because I am going through so much suffering behind the scenes. And I hate that word, sounds so intense, but it is true. We are in a pruning season. God is refining us with fire right now, in our life and in our marriage and our home life. And I want to be refined by fire. You become purified through it and sanctified, and like, I'm ready for that, but I wasn't expecting it to tie directly like postpartum, like for it to come boom right after birth, but it's no coincidence to me. So anyways, this video is probably so long, so if you've made it through, thank you. I just wanted to do it all in one fell swoop, one big video. But yes, baby Theo is so precious, perfect, loved, healthy. Here, I'm healthy, I'm doing well, and just so excited to continue to share more with you guys. And I just thank you so much for all the love and support you showed me through my pregnancy and bringing this baby into the world, and just like all the prayer and constant love from you guys. You guys are truly the best. And I hope you go out of your way today to love on someone and make them feel extra special, because they are. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.